Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
All right, I am here with Alex and creative cohort, one of my favorite multi-hyphenates, Todd Davies. And today we're going to be talking about the Painter and the Thief. And anyone who's interested in this fascinating doc can go to internationalfilmseries.com to click on a link there, and where the distributor Neon kindly has agreed to share its revenues with the IFS. The Painter and the Thief is the second feature-length documentary by Norwegian director Benjamin Riis, and it takes as its starting point the theft of two large paintings by Czech artist Barbara Kysilková from an Oslo gallery. This was back in 2015. And so he's working with 3 years of footage, as well as stuff that cribs from their past. The surveillance cameras helped incarcerate the two criminals, and Barbara ends up developing a relationship with the tattooed ringleader, Carl Bertil Nordland. And Nordland ends up becoming the subject of her new paintings. And with that, I am cracking open my beer to have scoop time with Alex and Todd. What'd you guys think?
Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Well, we kind of went the opposite on this one, Pablo. It was kind of, Alex was really cheering for it, and I was like, uh-huh. Yeah, I smell the phonus balonus coming off of this movie. Is this really a documentary? I kept saying, and Alex was going, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Yeah. I kind of, well, Alex, why don't you say what you thought of it, and I'll say what it was making me think of while I was watching it.
Well, there's a couple of things in it which do seem a little bit odd, as if the whole story is being told for the international market.
Really, the international wearing black, going to art galleries and loving junkies market.
But she is from Prague originally, I think, and then was in Berlin, and now she's in Norway, and the other characters are Norwegian. So I guess there's an explanation for why they all speak English throughout. But it does seem a little bit odd that the lingua franca of Norway in times of stress is always English.
and that when he writes a touching letter to her, it's all in English.
You know, I didn't even think about that.
And really good English, too. I mean, really good. I mean, much better than English as a second language. I mean, their English is excellent.
Now, I do want to say that it's extremely entertaining. It's very well done. It's very polished. It's very interesting if you take it as fiction. But if you were watching it like me and you're thinking, this is a documentary, you know, we made Three Businessmen to try and get people to pay attention to what they were watching and realize that maybe what you're being told on the screen is not exactly what's happening. And that was what I was thinking while I was watching it. I'm thinking, these people actually have cameras in the room with them? This is very hard for me to believe.
And because their self-possession is absolute. I mean, they never acknowledge the camera, even in moments of extraordinary high emotion, you know, where characters become fixated by something and weep. They never look at the camera. And that's very interesting, because that's kind of unbelievable that the camera could be such an invisible presence that their eye wouldn't stray to it.
And that was really the moment when I cracked, was when and people who view it will see that there is an extremely dramatic moment, which I will not ruin for you, but the character responds in such a dramatic way, and in exactly the dramatic way you would expect the character to respond, but not the way you would expect a person to respond who had a camera in the room with him. Definitely not.
All right. Well, if I can...
Who knew he had a camera?
Well, a couple, 2 cents in two, on the subject of English and how they even write in English, which I didn't even think about that, and that is a good point. However, I think the reason I didn't even think about it is because when I've traveled to Europe, I found that everywhere I went, everyone spoke English, and they spoke English so well that it was sort of a default position.
It's true. It's
and
true.
You find people in the art world as well, and even though he's a kind of a weird junkie, but he's had a good he's been educated in his childhood.
Yeah.
Now,
that's true.
But on the point of, I've always felt you could discuss documentary styles in almost like two terms. There's the fly on the wall documentary, and then there's the fly in the soup documentary. And and the fly in the soup documentary, of course, is Michael Moore, and then anyone who lets you know that the filmmaker is present. They're allowing themselves to be in the soup. But then there's the fly on the wall, and I do remember Maisels talking about how for him he would just be hanging out with these people for so long with the camera that they would sort of just forget that the camera was there. And given that this particular filmmaker was with his with the two people for 2 or 3 years.
3 years.
I actually didn't have an issue with that. And I also probably didn't have an issue with just because everything was so seamless in terms of the narrative that I was getting sucked into it. However, that being said, and where I will at this point flip over and say that, yes, I am with you on just how bizarrely fluid and silent the camera was. And for me, what it was is that there was a moment when she is arguing with her boyfriend, and it was
her husband. Oh,
sorry, her husband. And they were having an argument, and the camera is somehow able to go from behind her shoulder to behind his shoulder, right. And yet the conversation was not being interrupted in any way, shape, or form. And that that caught my eye in a way where it was like, boy, how did they achieve that? Now, I read today the New York Times review, and in there it did mention that it felt, I keep trying to remember the word that the reviewer used, but that it was that it almost like staged or scripted somehow. And
definitely
yet,
scripted.
And yet, it still is a documentary. Those are real people, I think. So I just think it does go to the power of how the drama seems to unfold
storytelling,
so perfectly that you get sucked into it.
The drama is really, really great, but you also are thinking, I was thinking, because if you're in the business if you've ever been in the business, you're busy thinking, where's the lighting coming from? Why are they looking at her while she's making this dramatic speech and then going over her shoulder to him who's reacting to this dramatic speech? They had to move the camera.
Yeah.
And it's very odd. It's very, very odd. And you don't believe it. I actually, at one point, she's making a dramatic speech to him, and I actually don't even believe he's in the room. I actually think she did it, and then they cut him into it later. That's the way it looks to me.
I mean, we will never know. And it's like when she's asking her husband for, money to pay for the rent on the studio and stuff. I mean, maybe he really is there on the other end, or maybe it's a symbolic thing that she says, I would naturally have a conversation with my old man at this point about paying the rent, and it recreates it. You don't really know, but.
This brings up why probably I'm a little too skeptical and annoyed about this, whereas Alex isn't in it, and Pablo rightly loved
delightful
the film.
Loved
the movie. I mean, it's a really interesting movie. But do you know who Anais Nin is, Pablo?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, well, I'm not sure that everybody at home knows who Anais Nin is.
Some of the younger viewers may not be aware.
Anais Nin was a really famous avant-garde writer. And she was she wrote her memoirs. There were like 6 different volumes of her diaries, which I consumed avidly when I was in high school. So this was like the early 70s, right? And I just thought, oh my God, what an amazing life. She was lovers with everyone. She sold her typewriter to support Henry Miller. Oh my God. And she went to all of these places by herself, Marrakesh, exotic places. I will never be like Aeneas Nin. So what do I find out 10 years later? Aeneas Nin was married to a middle-class doctor through all of this, and when she sold her typewriter, he gave her 5 more typewriters, you know? So when I was watching, and I have never felt so betrayed as when I found that out about Aeneas Nin. When I was watching this, and when the junkie says very romantically that he loves the artist because he knows when she buys him lunch, she can't afford her own lunch because she's used her own lunch money. All I can think is, what? Her husband isn't making her lunch? Where's her husband? That was all I could think. So I'm a little bit overly stimulated about this kind of thing. I'll pass it back to Alex.
But also, the good thing I thought was that, because that kind of brings it back into the world of the square, you know, which I don't remember which Scandinavian country it took place in, but it was all about black-clad artists and exhibition spaces, and it was really funny.
I like the square.
So it does.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was great. It was a good movie.
And the other thing that's so great in it is, like, how great to go to prison in Norway or to have mental health problems in Norway, because you don't just get given a load of pills. You actually get to speak to a genuine psychiatrist, you know. And if you go to prison, there's all these kind of diversions and work programs and kindly older guys to help you out.
Nordland even at one point says that he was scared about leaving prison and that he missed it later.
Yeah. Because it really looks great. It looks like a kind of just like it looks great.
Yeah. So what I liked about the doc is that it did have me. It kind of gets into this whole concept of who's the subject and who's the observer and who's the protagonist and who's really telling the story. And because you start out the way it's put together. First, you kind of come at it from the standpoint of the painter, and you think, oh, it's going to be her perspective. She's going to be the protagonist. But then it flips around and then you get it from Nordland's perspective, and he's starting to tell you what he thinks her story is. And I'm always kind of fascinated by those kinds of dynamics. And I was taken in by that.
Yeah, and that's the structure. That's the structure of it, isn't it? And the title of it as well. And they do, and also the camera, follows him at a certain point. It starts off following her and her discovery of the theft, and then it goes to but then when he goes to visit her, the camera is walking along behind him. So obviously the filmmaker had a lot of access to both of their time. And
yeah. Well,
it's a very stylish movie. It's very stylish.
Yeah.
And well worth watching.
Well worth watching. In fact, I've already had this conversation with an artist friend, and she's dying to watch it. And she texted me this morning and said, "Where can I find it? And where can Lanny find this movie, Pablo?"
Well, internationalfilmseries.com starting tomorrow, Friday. So it'll be on our webpage, and you can click on the link, and half of the proceeds will go to the IFS. So it's a win-win for us, of course.
Hey, and you were right. I per our telephone conversation, I actually asked a producer friend, a cinematographer, and a casting director, and they all said, "Oh yeah, no, the industry is opening up again. July, everybody's going to go to work, and they're all going to stay in." And then you get into all these stories about how people are all going to stay in motels and being hermetically sealed and stuff. But also, you can't get COVID-19 insurance, so people are going to have to sign a waiver in case they get coronavirus and die during the shoot, that they won't sue the production. And so we'll see how it goes. And Todd has a friend whose daughter has already gone off to Georgia to work on.
She hasn't gone. She works for a costuming house, and 2 of her coworkers have driven to Arkansas to work on a Lifeline movie. Lifetime,
Arkansas, sorry.
Lifetime or Lifeline? Lifetime, one of them. One of those, a movie.
Lifetime.
So that's kind of frightening because it's young people, But there you go.
Well, Boulder CU Boulder campus is one of the universities that's looking at hybrid models for returning students to campus, and that means that suddenly, if they go forth with this, that the landscape on campus will be changed dramatically, so that you'll only rooms that have 2 exits will be used, maybe, so that you can have one that's an entrance and one that's devoted to being an exit. And then everyone's got to have the ability to have X amount of space around them.
So in Munzinger, that means that you, instead of the usual 400-person audiences at the IFS doors, you'll be down to like 50 or 60 people a show.
I think the IFS needs to be a drive-in. That's just my opinion about it.
I'm still looking into it, Todd. I'm still looking into it.
Excellent.
I would love to commandeer some of the parking lots on campus and put on a show, because I do think that would be the way to go. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's a great idea. Yeah,
but we'll see. Yep. They're actually doing concerts that way. I just in my email box, I see that they're planning drive-in concerts, and I've got some friends who are musicians, and they're actually gonna they all have separate pickups, and they're gonna drive to different locations in their separate cars, and they will provide the music. So it's sort of like the musicians come to you in their cars, and while they're socially distant, they will play songs for different neighborhoods. So I think we're going to see some interesting creative solutions for how we can still bond and put on shows and create music and still be social interacting.
Actually, you know what, that would work really well in Tucson, because you think about Jeff Marzet's friend Howie and Giant Sand and the Chicha guys and all that music, because it's outdoors. Everything's outdoors in Tucson already, and they could have an amazing neighborhood touring rock show.
And there's maybe you could even do something similar with a film crew, Alex. Just make sure that everyone has their own car, and they all stay a certain separation apart. I think
they shoot their own scenes. They shoot their scenes on the phone.
They light them themselves.
Yeah.
They light them themselves.
And
they do the sound.
With a cigarette. They just smoke a cigarette.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for spending the time to watch the documentary.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you for turning us on to it.
It's always, and it was a really interesting watch, and Alex and I had a delightful time discussing it afterward.
Well, and here's the thing, is that I find that sometimes, and I'm not even saying that in the case of this movie, because the original movie that I was going to screen and talk about, and it was, and I won't even mention it because it's like 2.5 hours long, and I could only watch an hour of it. But while I was watching it, I was already thinking of all the things I wanted to say about it, because I really wasn't liking it at all. But it's so much more fun when you actually have a movie that has got really good, interesting themes that you can take apart later. So even if you might have an issue with the presentation or certain elements of it, but the fact that it actually produces sort of rich fodder for conversation, to me, that's always a plus.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And anyway, I didn't have a problem with the presentation. I just had a problem with how they presented the presentation.
Oh, we're going to go meta.
It said it was a fictional movie. I would have loved it.
This is very appropriate to go meta with this particular film. So, because who is the subject? Who is the observer? And then, and of course, we, the audience, is in on that bargain. So, all right. I have so much fun talking with you guys. I look forward to next week. I'll hopefully get a nice screener link before then, so you have a little bit more time to catch the next one. And Todd, you are always welcome to join. Anytime and every time.
Oh, thank you, Pablo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's so nice of you.
Thank you, Todd, for joining us.
Thank you,
right.
International Film Series. Yay.
Thank you, Jason, for recording this and putting it all together.
Yes, I'm raising my glass to Jason Phelps, who does our audio and puts all these things together. So thanks, Jason. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Todd. And thanks you, listener, who are tuning in. So hopefully we will have piqued your interest enough that you'll check out the film. And Alex, Todd, I shall talk to you next time.
Talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.
All right.
Bye.
Ciao.
And cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.